Hey everybody, First Warning Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich. Quick update on Dorian. Now, we're kind of getting to that time of year where hurricane season's ramping up, and we've got a couple systems out there, but one in particular, Tropical Storm Dorian, is one that has our attention in the southeast. And I'll kind of tell you what we do know, and more importantly, what we don't know. I know it's always like, hey, is this heading to this exact location? Some of those questions are a little bit harder to answer now, but I'm going to try to do the best I can with what we know right now. Here is the 11 a.m. advisory on Tropical Storm Dorian. It is still east of the Windward Islands. It is gaining strength. It's a very small system, which I'll show you in a minute and why that's kind of important to its further development. The updated track does turn it into a hurricane in about 24 hours from now, basically sometime late on Tuesday, and then moves it up towards between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Now, this is really crucial because those islands might not seem big to you in the United States, but those are pretty large islands, and especially Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominican Republic, very mountainous, but so is Puerto Rico. Now, that's a couple issues with that. That causes a lot of heavy rain because those mountains squeeze out moisture. Puerto Rico, this could be a significant flood threat, especially if it passes just to the west, and even in Dominican Republic and Haiti. But those big mountains also tear the system apart. So where it actually tracks over those islands will be really crucial to how strong this system can be. Now, right now, the Hurricane Center shows it weakening back to almost a tropical depression, very weak tropical storm, and moving over the Bahamas by this weekend, and then slowly gaining strength back to a tropical storm on Saturday morning in the central and northern Bahamas. But you can see the movement west-northwest at 14. Winds are now 60 miles per hour, so it's likely going to become a hurricane. And I'll show you some of the reasons why it's going to become a hurricane. First things first, we'll look at the visible imagery. And I'll drop my screen down here so you're not kind of out of the way a little bit. So we'll put it right there. So you can see there's a look at the loop, and you can see the very small nature of this system. It's got a very tight core, very good thunderstorms around the center. Here's a little wider view. I think does a better job. You could see it in relation to the other islands. Kind of shows you just how small it is in comparison to the rest of the islands. And that small size is kind of important here because there's a lot of dry air surrounding the storm. And I'll show you the water vapor loop in it, but there's a ton of dry air around here and here. And as long as it has a nice, tight little small center, it can insulate itself from dry air getting in train. Because otherwise, the wind shear is not that bad and the water is super warm. So the other parameters in the atmosphere would cause strengthening. The one thing that's deterring strengthening right now is that dry air which surrounds the system. And I'll show you what that looks like. You can see all this dry air showing up around the system. So as long as it kind of has a force field, which is the small nature of the circulation, then it can protect itself. That small core also means these are a little bit harder to forecast because the global models in particular are hard to sample such a small little system. So that small size is also problematic for forecasting. But I like the water vapor loop because it shows a couple things going on here. It's being steered primarily by a big ridge of high pressure to the north. And then there's a little trough digging down over the East Coast. And if you're in the Carolinas, you know what that feels like. It's been amazing, this cooler air. But this trough is going to move out. And what's going to happen is the ridge is going to build back in. But the timing of all that is kind of crucial. So when we look at the spaghetti plots, and these are this morning's plots only. I didn't put last night's old data in there. You can kind of see it kind of mirrors the Hurricane Center forecast. Basically tight clustering between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, up here into the Bahamas, and then there's a little noticeable shift back towards Florida. A couple of these models go off to the northeast, and then one goes down here. So there's a big split showing up here in the long range, which you kind of expect in the long range. It's not, that's way out there. That's 5 to 7 days. But right now, it's looking more and more like Florida. If I were to even tell you any area to watch out for, Florida looks like an area to keep an eye on. But I caution you, there is a huge spread in not only the guidance, but the intensity. We don't know how this is going to pass through these big islands and how much of it's going to be left. So it might be torn completely apart. It might weaken it slightly, and it can gain strength again. So if I'm in Florida, I'm paying particularly attention to this system. And then up here in the Carolinas, still something to keep an eye on, but it's a little less certain because we don't know if this thing's going to recurve this way, which I don't think is going to happen. I actually kind of think this kind of path is probably more likely. And I'm going to show you why I think that based on some of the long range guidance. So first things first, I'm going to show you that upper level pattern. So this is the 500 millibar look. and our system is down here. You can barely see it showing up here, but you see all this red? That's that ridge of high pressure. There's our trough. I'll illustrate this. This is the trough here. This is the ridge. So right now, this thing's being steered in this direction by this ridge of high pressure. Now, naturally, if this trough was here, you'd be concerned because that's where it's going to go. It would head towards there. But look what happens over time. That trough lifts out, basically. And this is going in through the end of the week. And you can see the system. I'm going to stop this about Thursday morning. So it looks like our system is somewhere down here, basically where the Hurricane Center has it over Hispaniola and the Puerto Rican area. But look at the ridge starting to build back in as the trough is lifting out. So the trough is up here. It's lifting out, and the high is actually starting to build back in. Now, you saw some of the spaghetti plots show that kind of recurve kind of coming up. That's why the spaghetti plots look like this. They come up here, and then it looks like they do that. That's because this ridge starts to build back in, and you can actually see it starting to build back in. And I'm going to stop this Friday. So our system looks to be right there, Southern Bahamas, but look at the ridge building to the north. There is a weakness still over the southeast, but it looks like it fills in pretty quickly, and this is by Saturday morning. So notice the ridge pretty much anchoring itself back over the southeast, so the ridge starts to build. So that's why you're seeing a lot of the guidance, especially the global models, and the European models kind of in the same kind of boat here, trying to show it back, going back towards the west over Florida into the Gulf. So that's as of right now. Now, this big caveat here, so much of this can change. What happens with the upper level pattern, and what happens with the storm itself? Does it maintain itself? Does it weaken? And you can see as we go through the weekend, that ridge builds back over the southeast and kind of protects us and kind of forces whatever's left of Dorian, if it's still a system, which it probably will be, just based on how small it is. I think it's going to maintain itself. Pushes it into the Gulf of Mexico at some point. And then there, who knows? I mean, that's where things get interesting. So that's why I think that left turn over Florida is probably going to make more sense. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of this guidance here show this coming up here and then doing one of these. Now, once it gets up into here, there's all kinds of question marks. If it's here, does it recurve here? Interaction with Florida is going to weaken it. So there's more questions than answers right now. But it's one of those things where you got to watch this system. This is one of those things, if I'm living in the southeast, basically anywhere from the Outer Banks to the Gulf of Mexico, I'm watching it all in this area. And because Florida sticks out, you're definitely watching it here. So that's kind of where we are right now with this system. Now, as far as intensity is concerned, that's a big, big question because we don't know how strong that system's going to be. It's a very small system right now. It's developing an outflow jet, we call it, towards the north. There's one developing to the south. So there are signs that it's gaining strength and going to maintain itself. But the dry air is always one of those things. If the dry air can find any way to get into the core, that could weaken it. And then if it interacts with Hispaniola, the big mountains there, and even Puerto Rico, that could weaken it. So there's still a lot of question marks there. So let's take a look at some of that intensity guidance. So because of that small size and the interaction with dry air and big islands, there's a lot of spread in what we call the intensity guidance. So when you look at the intensity guidance spread, it's pretty much all over the place. Some weaken it to a tropical storm, which is actually official forecast. The median is like somewhere is a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, 45 to 50. And then there's a big spread up in the category 1. A couple of these outliers, I wouldn't read too much into it, but that's always a possibility. Because of the small size, you got to keep that. So this is not real helpful, honestly. When there's this big of a spread going out, you always are a little bit concerned about that. So it's something to keep an eye on right now. Nothing that I would change plans for. It is just too far out there. It hasn't even entered the Caribbean. So we've got, till basically the end of the week, we'll start probably having a better idea if there'll be a threat in the southeast. But everybody, like I mentioned, everybody in the southeast, from basically the Carolinas down towards the Gulf Coast, need to be paying attention to this. And people in Florida, in particular, should have your eyes on Dorian. If you don't have your hurricane plan and kit ready to go, now is the time to do it, because if it isn't going to be Dorian, there's likely going to be another system at some point over the next month and 2 weeks, basically through the middle of October, that will have a threat from a tropical system. Of course, I'll post updates throughout the week as things change. I'll give you my thoughts probably every single day as we get closer to the weekend. Have a great Monday, everybody.